So this lesson is going to focus on the core of American government, the Constitution. And today we're going to look at the idea of limited government. From the last lesson, we learned how America established a constitutional democratic republic, giving power to the people and limiting the majority through making it a representative democracy. So if you thought in the last lesson that Founder Fathers were afraid of mob rule, the thing that they feared even more was tyrannical government. The idea behind a constitution is that it limits government and keeps government from becoming all-powerful and turning into a dictatorship or a monarchy. So America had just fought a war against England, the American Revolution, and the colonists were having trouble with the government in England telling them what they could do and what they could not do. So during colonial times, the fastest way to get between continents was by ship. So if England had issued a new law, someone had to get in the ship, go across the ocean to the colonies, institute the law, get back in a ship, go back to England, tell them how it went. Not very efficient. And this is one reason the colonists developed their own systems of government, because it was just such a wide, long time between the two countries. So why would the colonists want to replace what they saw as a tyrant across the ocean with a tyrant in their backyard? And the answer is they didn't. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to limit the government. And the Constitution is not the first colony's attempt at government or keeping it small. The first attempt at government was the Articles of the Confederation. And the Articles were created during the American Revolution at the Second Continental Congress. The Articles worked really well at first when the colonies all had a common goal to defeat England. The Articles of the Confederation allowed for strong state governments with loose ties to a national government to fight the American Revolutionary War. But after the war, the cracks are going to begin to show. Here's a chart that shows your weaknesses of the Articles of the Confederation and then the outcome. So for example, Congress had no power to levy or collect taxes. So the government was always short of money. But this was the idea that the states would have a strong state government and they didn't want a strong central or strong federal government. But the Articles are going to show that they do need a stronger central government. They needed to make the states less like city-states and more like a United States. And this is what leads to the Constitution. Remember in the first lesson we talked about the purpose of government. The founders knew that they needed a government and they had many different types to choose from. See how these lessons sort of build on themselves? This is not a lesson we're going to discuss how big or what the role of government is. We're going to look at that in later lessons. Today we are focusing on what the Founding Fathers believed when they created the Constitution. That belief was that government could get too big and take away people's freedoms. The Constitution was written with the idea of forming a stronger federal government, but also limiting that government so that it would not become too big that it controlled the lives of the people. They wanted a government that the people controlled, not that a government that controlled the people. So there's a difference. The Constitution, the document that creates our government, this document described how the Founding Fathers believed the new government should work. So the first portion, or the introduction to the Constitution, is called the preamble. And here's where we find the famous words, "we the people." And so the first two words of the Constitution, "we the people," establishing up front that America is going to be a democracy. The Constitution then goes to work at laying that government out, what that government's going to look like, and limiting the government and making sure that one person or group does not hold all the power. And this is done through separation of powers. Don't get separation of powers confused with balance of power. We're going to discuss that later. Separation of powers is very simple. Divide the responsibilities of government up so that one person does not have all the power. Separate the powers. So you have three branches: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch, and each has its own set of powers. So immediately after the preamble, we get a description of the legislative branch. and it states that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. So what is legislative power? Congress makes laws. It is the only branch of government that can make laws. The president can't make laws. He can suggest, he can encourage, but he does not make the laws. Only Congress can. So legislation equals laws. Congress is the only branch of government that can declare war. Now, students often get this confused and think that the president declares, but he doesn't. This gets a little bit tricky because if you think about it, when was the last time we declared war? Well, that was in 1941 against Japan during World War II. Wilson went to Congress and asked for a declaration of war. So all of their military actions are actually considered conflicts: Vietnam, Korea, First and Second Iraq War. We're going to spend a whole lot of time looking at Congress and a whole lot of time looking at the executive branch, so we'll cover that in more depth later. But declarations of war come from Congress. Article 2 describes the executive branch. What does it mean to have executive power? The executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and together with the Vice President chosen for the same term be elected as follows. And I'm taking just the first portion of each section. We're not covering everything that it says. The President carries out the laws that Congress makes. It is the role of the President to be the power behind the laws. What good are laws if they're not followed, and what good are laws if they're not enforced? The President enforces the laws using different agencies. He manages the different agencies, such as the FBI, CIA, Department of Defense, Environmental Protection, so on and so forth. So the executive branch is the President. The President is also the Commander-in-Chief of the military, so where bases should be built, and if we should go to war, he manages the military operations. Article 3. Article 3 describes the judicial branch. What is judicial power? The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So the judicial branch is the branch of government that interprets the laws. The judicial branch contains all the courts and judges, but is headed up by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States. So in America, everyone is entitled to a fair trial, and it's the role of the courts and the judges to provide this. Not the Congress or President can actually convict or release someone from breaking a law. That's the role of the judicial branch. So now that we have looked at the distinct powers in each of the branches, this is where we are. We have the Constitution, and in the Constitution, it lays out in Article 1, the legislative branch, which creates the laws. In Article 2, the executive branch that enforces the law. And Article 3, the judicial branch, which interprets the law. So in the following lessons, we're going to look at each individual branch and how they do this.